Okay, so we've all seen those headlines about, AI writing poetry and composing music, even like building websites. It's pretty wild, right? But have you ever wondered how far that actually goes? Like, how smart is this stuff, really?
It's a good question. And a lot of the time those headlines, they just kind of scratch the surface.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to deep dive into some really interesting research from Apple. And they're taking a look at what they call large language models, LLMs. I know it sounds a little bit jargony.
Sure, but those LLMs, they're basically what powers things like ChatGPT.
Exactly. So pretty important.
Yeah.
And this research, it focuses on what AI can't do, specifically like when it comes to reasoning. So this is about kind of the limits of AI.
Yeah. And this is something that we really need to understand, as AI starts to touch more and more areas of our lives, right?
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. The paper makes this point that LLMs, they're really good at pattern recognition, but not so much at actual reasoning.
Yeah. And that's a really important distinction, right?
Totally. So give me an example. Like, how does that play out in the real world?
Well, okay, imagine someone who can flawlessly recite grammar rules, but can't actually put together a coherent sentence. That's kind of what we're seeing with LLMs sometimes.
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean. So they know the rules, but they don't get the meaning, really.
Exactly. And that can be a problem because, in the real world, things aren't always so neat and tidy. You need to be able to adapt and to think on your feet.
Right. And the paper, it has this example. I thought it was really interesting. They gave these LLMs some logic problems, but they just tweaked the wording a little bit.
Right.
Same logic, different phrasing. And the LLMs just totally bombed.
Yeah, and that's kind of a red flag, right? Because it suggests that these LLMs, they might be more focused on just matching patterns in the data than actually understanding the underlying concepts.
Right. Like, it makes you wonder if, all those headlines we see about AI outperforming humans, maybe we need to take those with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, it definitely raises some questions about how we're benchmarking these systems.
So earlier you mentioned something about LLMs gaming the system. Like, what did you mean by that?
So think about it like this. Imagine you're training an LLM to, let's say, identify images of cats.
Okay, I'm with you.
And let's say that in the training data set, a lot of the cat images also happen to have a blue blanket in the background.
Okay, so it's learning to associate cats with blue blankets.
Right. And the problem is that the LLM might start to think that the blue blanket is actually part of what makes something a cat.
Oh, wow. So it could, see a picture of a blue blanket without a cat and still think it's a cat.
Exactly. And it might even get really good at identifying cat pictures in that specific data set, acing the benchmark. But it's not because it actually understands what a cat is.
That's a little worrying.
Yeah. And this is a simplified example, but it gets at a bigger point. We need to be really careful about how we're training these models and what data we're using, because if they're just learning to parrot patterns without truly understanding, that can lead to some pretty serious problems.
Especially, like you said, as AI gets used in more and more high-stakes areas like healthcare and finance. I mean, the thought of an AI doctor misdiagnosing someone because it got hung up on a weird turn of phrase, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential for AI to do good in those fields, like helping doctors make more accurate diagnoses, or helping financial analysts spot patterns that humans might miss.
Right. But it sounds like we're not quite there yet.
Not quite. There's still a lot of work to be done, but, that's what's so exciting about this field. There's so much potential for discovery and innovation.
So what are some of the solutions being explored? Is there anything that can be done to bridge this reasoning gap in AI?
Well, one promising area is this idea of incorporating more symbolic reasoning into these models. So basically, it's about teaching them to manipulate abstract concepts and logical rules in a way that's closer to how humans think.
So instead of just recognizing patterns, they're actually understanding the relationships between things.
Right. And that's a really difficult problem to solve, but there are some really smart people working on it.
So it's not just about bigger data sets and faster processors. It's about fundamentally changing the way these models think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a pretty big shift. But I think it's one that's necessary if we want to create AI that can truly reason and solve problems in the real world.
Okay, so lots to think about. But I think the big takeaway here is that AI is still in its early stages.
Yeah, it's important to remember that. And I think it's also important to be realistic about what AI can and can't do. We need to be careful about hyping it up too much.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts?
I think the big question that this research raises is like, what does it actually mean for a machine to reason? Is it even possible for a machine to truly understand something in the same way that a human does? And if so, like, what are the implications of that?
Yeah, those are some big questions. And honestly, I don't know if we have the answers yet.
Me neither. But I think they're questions that we need to start asking ourselves now, before AI gets too far ahead of us.
Definitely. Okay, well, we're going to leave you with that thought. This has been a really interesting deep dive into, a really rapidly evolving field. So keep those questions in mind as you continue to explore the world of AI.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to crack the code of true AI reasoning.
Okay, until next time.